Hello and welcome back. We are at the exchange. As you notice, the background's not purple this time. Wish it was. I like the purple a whole lot better, but anyway, I don't make the choice on the lighting. Before we get going, let's like, subscribe, and share. Excuse me. The Exchange podcast, and it is great stuff going on. Like I said, every week, new subscribers. We're growing. Always good news for that. But tell your friends about us and put your chats in the put your comments in the chat, and I will get to them. And I promise, if you disagree with me, I won't do what I've already had some people doing this week, and that is telling me that it is probably time I die. But I digress. Anyway, love to hear from you, and today we're going to talk about why not? Seems to be some kind of meeting that went on in the White House about aliens. And I've got my thoughts on that. I wasn't invited, but I don't know anyone who was. But it's interesting because why? Why are we talking about aliens? And I kind of want to talk about something. I want to play a video, and this is a little bit of a lengthy video, and this is not going to be just an extremely long, or probably not as long as I normally would go on a podcast, but I want to play a video, and then from there, probably break it down as we go through it, and we will not get through the entirety of this video, but the question is the Book of Enoch that is mentioned in the Bible, the Book of Enoch that you can go buy off the Barnes & Noble bookshelf? I don't think so. I don't believe so. I think more evidence supports that it's not, but there's a lot of people who do, and I think that the whole alien thing is probably a distraction. I think I've said on this podcast before that I think they were going to use some kind of alien invasion angle to try and I don't want to use the word explain. That's the word I'm looking for. To try to explain the rapture when you've got millions of people who will disappear from this world scene. I've thought that for years. It's certainly not an original idea with me, but that's kind of what I lean towards. And right now there's a huge debate as to whether or not aliens, are they real? Did God create them? Are they demonic? This, that, the other. I will tell you, I lean more towards the latter. I do believe that they are demonic. But I also am smart enough to realize that God created a vast universe. But I believe that he created one humanity. And I've had discussions with people who believe in multiverses, and look, I mean, even in a multiverse, you're still going to have humanity, and that's a whole different issue altogether. But there's a guy that keeps coming around on the internet. I think he's been on Glenn Beck. He's kind of touting all over. I mean, he's a smart guy, but a lot of the stuff he gets into is not anything that I myself subscribe to, but I just kind of want to let's look at his video, and then we'll go from there. Let's just take a look, and then we'll break it down as we get there.
The Book of the Watchers. The antediluvian world was considered, again, almost universally by the primary ancient cultures around the world as the Golden Age. Of course, this is a term that comes from the Greeks, and they all have their own terms for it. For example, the ancient Egyptians referred to it as Zep-Tepi, the first time. It's the same thing. It's the same idea. So what is the Golden Age? What is the first time? Yeah. This is the time when the gods descended from heaven and co-inhabited the earth with mankind, and furthermore, copulated with human women, and progenerated hybrid offspring.
I
So
love
I'm
this
thinking
Hobbit.
now, we were just talking about the book of Genesis.
I love this Hobbit.
Of Genesis 6.
Genesis 6.
A confusing passage where the church fathers are somewhat divided on it. You know,
Waiting for
one
Gandalf to come break
explanation
this
of Genesis 6, the sons of God looked on the daughters of men and found them to be beautiful and went and did the thing that men and women do.
Is that orange juice he's drinking?
That one reading of that is it's demons or something. Angels or demons mating with human beings.
Yeah.
Now, one issue with that, of course, is that to make a human being in the ordinary
explain
course
why
of
this
things, you need
conversation's
two
happening.
people that have bodies,
not just
not
be
an
Jews.
incorporeal being and a corporeal being. However, this is, I think, Justin Martyr in the Second Apology says that it's
That's right.
angels and humans.
That's right.
Though there is some
Tertullian.
Tertullian, and really a number
Church
of
fathers.
church
Here we go.
fathers,
Yes.
early Christian
Origin.
fathers. Yeah. Now, but there is some disagreement. The one view is the Sethite view,
Yes.
that the sons of God refer to the descendants of Seth, and the daughters of man refer to the descendants of Cain. And then if you were to take an even more metaphorical and symbolic view, it's this notion that virtuous men are seduced
Yes.
by not so virtuous women,
Yes,
which is
right.
an anthropological fact of history. But your view is...
Oh, you've covered the bases there. So
I like Michael
I would
Knowles,
say
by
the
the way.
biblical view, and the only one that makes logical sense, is that the sons of God in Genesis 6 are an angelic faction. These are angels. These are not men. The sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were comely, and they decided to take wives from among the daughters of men, and they copulated
Very
with them.
educated
and
word.
The production of
Very
their union
comely.
was giants, the Nephilim. See,
I wish I had his hairline.
that story that's found in Genesis 6, the writer of Genesis, when he's writing about the sons of God and this affair, and it's just a little snippet.
Yeah.
He does not elaborate.
Yeah.
He doesn't enlarge on this strange digression in the Genesis narrative. He just mentions this bizarre thing.
You know, I've started to read the Bible since I was a kid. I said, I want to read the whole Bible, but I
That's good.
wouldn't finish
You
it
need to read the Bible.
often. So I would start it again eventually. I'd say, okay, I'm going to start it again. So I've read the book of Genesis like 1 billion times or something.
Really?
And
Wow.
you know, every time you get to that, and you say, wait, what? Hold on. Did you
Exactly.
what was that part about? Hold on.
That's right. To back up, we need an elaboration on that. Well, the thing is that I'm totally persuaded that the writer of Genesis, as he's writing about the sons of God, this bizarre affair, he's not elaborating on it because the story is already well known.
Huh.
He's just assuming
Right.
he's assuming that the audience already knows what he's talking about because this was one of the most monumental events that's ever happened.
Even you see this in the New Testament when specific people who were either alive at the time of the writing or who had been alive within living memory. They'll say, yeah, you know, so-and-so, the daughter of so-and-so or the son of so-and-so, yeah, he saw this happen, and here's just a little bit, you know, anyway, we all know, right?
Exactly.
You all know Johnny, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so you're
I
saying
do.
that this
I know
is
Johnny.
happening in the book of Genesis, like, yeah, of course, we all know
Saying
about
that the writer of Genesis is assuming that his audience is conversant with the larger narrative that expands on that on the mention of the sons of God, on the writer of Genesis allusion to that story.
Moses.
The audience already knew the whole story, so he didn't have to repeat it. There was no need to go back into all the details.
Now, two questions then. One, how does, at least the traditional Christian understanding of what an angel is, which I'm persuaded by, is that an angel is incorporeal. And one can go further, you know, St. Thomas Aquinas describes angels as being, in a way, unique species.
I think
that
Paul says it. They're ministering
We have
spirits.
choirs of angels, we have different hierarchy of angels, but they don't communicate by speaking, for instance, because they don't have vocal cords and mouths. Now, angels do interact with human beings in mystical and interesting ways, but angels in themselves don't have bodies. Human beings do have bodies and rational souls. We have intellect and we have flesh and we have will. And then there are the lower animals who have bodies and they have instinct and they have appetite.
All right, let me stop him right there because something that I want to allude to, and he mentioned this, and this is a little bit off topic, but he talks about angels not having vocal cords and they don't have the same ability as as humans, as far as being able to reason. Obviously, they can talk somehow because we read throughout the entire Scripture that they do. I think God makes some kind of modifications for that. But the Scripture that he asks, "What are angels?" Well, Hebrews 1:14 tells us, "Are not the angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation?" The psalmist tells us that we are created a little lower than the angels. But then Paul tells us that we will judge angels. We are going to judge angels because as we're being redeemed, as we are being saved, you say, "Whoa, what do you mean being saved? I thought once I'm saved, I'm good to go." I'm saved, but I'm being saved. I don't believe in unconditional eternal security. I'm saved, but I'm being saved. And every day that I wake up, I make a choice. I make a conscious decision on what I'm going to do that day, how I'm going to live my life, and am I going to pray, and am I going to trust that God's going to spare me from, excuse me, He's going to not lead me into temptation, which He won't, but giving me the strength and delivering me from evil. But angels are ministering spirits, and I talked about this last week when Jesus says to the Sadducees, "Have you not read that men are like angels?" Well, He's mocking them, and they're right. Angels are ministering spirits. They are spirits. They're not like us. This is part of what makes Satan so jealous of Adam and Eve in the garden. They're not like us. So the demonic has always infiltrated the world, if you will, creation that God set up after Adam and Eve, because they're very intrigued. They're very intrigued because we are created in the image of God. So because of that, they tend to want to slide into our world and basically confuse and deceive, if you will. All right, so let's pick up and let's continue with this conversation.
But they don't have intellect and will. So we're kind of this middle ground. We've got the reason, the intellect and the will, albeit greatly degraded, of an angel, but we got the body of an animal, and we're kind of this meeting point. So how does an incorporeal being create a child with a corporeal being, or do you have a different view of angels?
Great question.
I think we need to back up a little bit because we have to deal with what I call the first cause. So let's assume for a moment that Genesis 6 is angels, and they're looking down at the daughters of men, and they're lusting after them.
Yeah.
They're desiring to take them as wives and to copulate with them, to have intercourse with them.
Yeah.
So what's the first cause here? Lust.
Yeah.
Yep.
In fact, when I was talking about the elaboration of that story, why the writer of Genesis didn't bother to elaborate on it, is because it was well known to the ancient Hebrews.
Yeah.
In the book of Enoch, which was found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. The book of Enoch is actually quoted verbatim in the New Testament in the book of Jude, verbatim.
Right. So it's considered an apocryphal book or non-canonical book. It's not included in any canon of the Bible.
And there's a reason for that.
Certainly not in the history of the church, making ecumenical council formal decrees.
Thank you, Knowles.
But it has been around.
Except for in Ethiopia.
Ethiopia.
In Ethiopia, both the
Explain that,
the
please.
Beta Israel Jews, the ancient Jewish community, and the Tawahedo Orthodox Christians
What about
long
the
ago
Coptics?
incorporated and preserved the Book of Enoch in their canon.
Why didn't the Coptics?
And as you say, there are references, it would seem, in the New Testament. So
Many.
what is... I didn't know that.
There are allusions. There are many allusions to the Book of Enoch. For example, when Jesus says, in my Father's house are many mansions. Well, where's that come from?
It's talking about our...
Book of Enoch.
Nowhere to be found
I don't know,
in
I've
the
never
Old
read the Book of Enoch.
There are many allusions, but then, as I said, in Jude, it's verbatim. And Jude says that Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied, saying, and then copy from First Enoch, paste into his epistle.
No.
So they were conversant. The early church,
Hold
the
up,
church fathers,
hold up.
the disciples of Christ.
I want to stop real quick. He just said the word epistle. That word's epistle. All right, carry on.
Christ himself and all of the writers of the Bible, all of them were conversant with the Book of Enoch. There's no question. In fact, I believe that if you were living in first century Jerusalem, before it was destroyed by the Romans, and if you were to walk into the temple during the time of Christ, into the synagogue, I think you would find in the scriptorium, where all of the sacred scrolls are kept, you would find a manuscript that was representative of what today we call First Enoch, Ethiopic Enoch.
I would even say, as someone who is totally innocent of the Book of Enoch, I've never read it. I have no strong opinions of whether it was some huge mistake not to include it in the canon. I don't think there are mistakes in the canon.
And I'm not arguing that it was, by the way.
Exactly. My view is, I think that the Proto-Evangelium of James, for instance, is an edifying work to read and can inform us. It's useful. Maybe it's not canon, but it's useful. And so that seems to be kind of the view that you're taking.
Well, I will say this, and that is my view, but I will say this. I'll add.
So what I like, what Michael Knowles is doing here is pay real close attention. I've not previewed this video, so I'm completely going off the cuff, but I can see where he's headed here. What I like what he's doing here is this guy is defending why Enoch, the Book of Enoch, is a canonized book of the Bible. It's not. First off, let's realize it's only in one Bible, and that's the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible. Every other canon in Christianity leaves it out for very good reasons. Because for one, it just didn't pass the smell test, and they did not look at it as it was inspired. Remember that Peter said that these holy men wrote as the Holy Spirit moved upon them, and they did not feel that that was the case with the Book of Enoch, so they left it out. So this guy is actually defending the Book of Enoch. Michael Knowles is just simply laying it out, saying, this is why the church left it out. So just pay attention. I like what he's doing here.
That in the Book of Enoch, see, the Book of Enoch, First Enoch, is very complex, and we're going to get back to what I called the first cause in a minute with Enoch. But the Book of Enoch is very complex. First Enoch, there are 3 different books of Enoch. Only one of them, portions of it, were written before Christ.
If I smoked,
that's the one
I'd
I'm
have a
interested
cigar
in.
too.
First Enoch. There's Second Enoch, which is called the Slavonic
Shouldn't
Enoch,
smoke.
and Third Enoch, which is called the Hebrew Enoch. First Enoch is known as the Ethiopian Enoch because the Ethiopians preserved it. First Enoch, the oldest portions of First Enoch, namely the Book of the Watchers and the Book of Parables, were most certainly written before Christ. And why is this important? Because some of the most extraordinary, astounding Christological prophecies pertaining to the Son of Man, which is the title that Jesus used most often when speaking of himself, are in the parables in First Enoch. I mean, absolutely stunningly accurate prophecies pertaining to Jesus of Nazareth, written before Christ.
Is there any dispute over the dating of the first book of Enoch?
Most scholars will date, in fact, almost universally, scholars date the earliest portions of Enoch to sometime around 300 BC. Now, there are it's a complicated document because it's a compilation of text written by various authors. I'm most interested in the first 2 sections of First Enoch, which are the Book of the Watchers and the Parables, precisely because they're dated to before the birth of Christ. And my whole point in bringing up Enoch was you have that snippet in Genesis.
Yeah.
Well, that story is elaborated in the Book of Enoch. In fact, that's where the story comes from, is the Book of Enoch. That little reference in Genesis, if you want to know the full story of what the author is alluding to, you read First Enoch, specifically the Book of the Watchers, the first section. And it tells you this extraordinary narrative. I mean, it's what I call the Enochian tale. And about the sons of God, which are designated as watchers in First Enoch, that they're looking down, they're seeing the daughters of men, and it's basically almost copy paste into Genesis, the Genesis 6 reference. And intriguingly enough, in R.H. Charles' translation, it's the same verses, Genesis 6, 1 through whatever it is 4, I think, the sons of God. But in the Book of Enoch, it's the angels. And by the way, that's the way the Septuagint renders it as well. Genesis 6, the angels are looking down at the daughters of men, that they're fair, that they're beautiful, and they lust. Okay, so that's why I told you to back up. I call that the first cause of the angel's sin in this particular case, the Watcher's rebellion. The first cause.
That's the first cause of humanity sin.
Lust. Mm-hmm. How do you explain lust for spiritual beings who don't have bodies? How do you explain incorporeal beings having sexual impulses?
That is a very good question, but just before we get to it, you wouldn't say this is the first sin that the angels committed, because the rebellion of the angels, the rebellion of Satan, would have had to predate.
This particular incident,
Yes,
this was the catalyst for what they were about to do.
Yeah, so how does an incorporeal being, become tumescent, to use a diplomatic word, or fair-looking ladies on the ground?
That's right.
I want to hear this answer.
Do these angels, according to 1 Enoch, again, which is the elaboration of the Genesis 6 reference, not only do they lust after these women, they are determined to take them as their wives and procreate offspring with them. Yeah. So they lust, that's the first cause. Yeah. Then they descend to the earth, according to 1 Enoch. 200 watchers descend to the earth on the summit of Mount Hermon. And Mount Hermon's very interesting in the Bible. They descend to the summit of Mount Hermon. They bind themselves by an oath of mutual imprecations. In other words, all for one, one for all. We're all in this together. They knew it was a great sin, but they were going to accept the consequences together, whatever befall. And then that's why by the way, the Mount Hermon has been known since time immemorial as the Mountain of Oath. And then they descended into the plains, and they chose each one woman, one maiden that they desired to wed, who they ultimately took to wife. They copulated with these women. These women conceived and gave birth to giants, demigods, the offspring of God and man. Okay? This is the Hebraic cosmological paradigm of the antediluvian world. This is the Hebraic paradigm of the Golden Age, of Zep Tepi. Because the ancient Mesopotamians and the ancient Egyptians and the Greeks and the Romans and all the rest of them, they believe that the very same thing occurred. That the gods descended to the earth. That they copulated with human women. I mean, look at Atlantis, the story of Atlantis. Everybody knows about the city of Atlantis and the legend of Atlantis. But very few people pay attention to what Plato writes in the Timaeus and Critias dialogue, where he talks about Atlantis. He has Solon of Athens traveling to Egypt, and he's being informed by the priest of Sais about the extraordinary past of the Athenians that he's unaware of. And part of this past involves this conflict that they had, this epic conflict with Atlantis and the Atlanteans. And they tell him the whole story, right? And everybody's familiar with Atlantis, that Atlantis was this advanced ancient city.
It's a great resort in the Caribbean.
Right, that as well, yes. It still exists today.
In a slightly degraded form. Perfectly pleasant.
It does. So that Atlantis was this advanced civilization that was destroyed in a day and a night in cataclysm, right? But Plato has the priest of Sais telling Solon in the dialogue the full story. Yeah. And what's the beginning of the story of Atlantis?
All right, and we are going to take a break there, and this is going to be a two-part. This is a good conversation, and I think we're probably going to we won't do it next Saturday, but the Saturday after, we can carry this over. And I want to carry this over because I think what they're saying here is really good. And you got to understand, my stance on the Book of Enoch is that there's a reason why it was left out. And like I said, this is not going to be a very long podcast because the format of this one is a little bit different than the formats of the other ones. And kind of going forward, it's just it's still in a development stage. I mean, as you know, so much stuff has changed over the last year to 2 years of this podcast's existence, but it's been good. I mean, there's not been anything that is negative. But I try to keep my finger on the pulse of the direction and see what people are actually getting into, what they like. And I think these kind of conversations right now are necessary because everybody is kind of in a state of confusion, if you will, because you're hearing from the news, you're hearing even from people in ministry and in clergy about some secret meeting that happened about UFOs. I want to leave the podcast off with this today. I heard someone say that, pastors need to tell their churches about this meeting, as it was supposedly said. The pastors needed to tell their churches about this meeting because this could end up creating a problem in the church, whatever. It could end up hurting the faith. It's almost to the point that it could end up shutting the church down. Remember something. Jesus said, upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. If anything makes me believe that if anything makes me believe that the aliens are a demonic thing, is the fact that it wants to attack the church. The government wants to protect the church. We don't need the government's protection. We have Christ's protection. And Jesus told us, he said that the gates of hell would not prevail against the church. Trust me, invaders from outer space is not going to, invasions, that's not going to certainly hurt the church. They're not, Jesus isn't worried about that at all. There's nothing making him blink. There's nothing making him think twice. There's nothing making him shaking his boots, so to speak, as to where the state of his church will be between now and eternity. He knows exactly where it's at, and he bought and paid for it with his blood. And aliens and Nephilim and the Jolly Green Giant and whoever else cannot bring the church down. Won't happen. Satan has tried, just like he did with Israel, and still tries with Israel. He's trying it with the church. It's not going to happen. We have the blessed hope of Revelation chapter 4. The church will be raptured out. Jesus tells John, he says, come up here and I will show you these things that must come after these things. And what things is he talking about? He's talking about the great tribulation that would come upon all of the earth after the things of the church is out of here. And by that, I mean the work that the church is doing right now, where Jesus said, go into all the world and preach the gospel. I'm really shocked that I'm even on this subject, just simply but I'm also on it because, too, I do think that there are those of us who need to address it. And I'm also very much one who just says, hey, if you're a preacher, just preach the gospel. If you're a teacher, just teach the gospel. I deal with a wide range of topics on this podcast. That's the reason that it's called the Exchange Podcast. But at the same time, I don't look at it from we can talk about whatever, but at the end of the day, I'm always going to just simply have the same statement that I always do, and that is believe the Bible, believe the words of God. And if you have questions about the Bible, that's okay. Just keep reading it. The Holy Spirit will make it real to you. He will reveal the truth of it to you. He's not going to give you all of the truth and open all of the truth to you all at once, because we would not be able to handle that. But continue to read it, and every time you read it, understand the Holy Spirit will open these truths, and you don't have to worry. You don't have to worry about little green Martians. You don't have to worry about it, because we're here to serve one. And that's why this week and the next podcast, I'm going to kind of delve into this a little bit, subject that I was really kind of wanting to stay away from, but nobody's wanting to stay away from it. And maybe try to bring in some biblical truth to what's going on, and without getting into, is NCC 1701, that's Star Trek, by the way, just in case you didn't know, that was the serial number to the USS Enterprise. But just in case that serial number shows up to your house, understand God is in control. And until next time, go with God and be blessed. Find a church to be in somewhere tomorrow. Worship Him and forget about Martians.